Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of At the Movies with William Fletcher. As per usual, I am your host, William Fletcher, and this week I'm joined once again by Barney.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, no George this time, unfortunately. He had other commitments.
He has unfortunately passed away.
Yeah. No, but don't worry, he'll be back. Got some stuff planned to do with him in the future. But it's just us two for this week's episode. And so this week we will be covering the 2013. You could argue it's kind of a romantic comedy, but
I'd say yeah. No, I would.
Don John. So
Yeah.
So I came to you suggesting this to do, and you heard of it before I had you watch it, right?
I had heard of it. It's something I'd heard the name floating around. I don't think I necessarily knew what it was about.
Okay.
Around to watching it for this podcast.
Yeah. So you watched it like very recently, so it's very fresh.
Mere hours ago.
Hours ago, okay. I watched it like a couple days ago because I've seen this one before a few times. To sort of put my cards on the table, I love this movie. I think it's really, really great. And we'll get more into why I love it so much. I think you're probably going to like it less than me. But that's just my guess.
Yeah. No, you would be right. I wouldn't say I love it. I did quite enjoy the film.
Okay, but you wouldn't put it like
it kind of yeah. No, I wouldn't put it as like all-time great film, Don John. But if somebody said, oh yeah, I like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I'm like, well, yeah, this
something
film.
you'd recommend.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll just sort of touch on the plot briefly, and then we can sort of just go through the film, like we did with Collateral. I think that's probably a pretty fair way to do it.
No, that works for me.
So the plot. So it's Joseph Gordon-Levitt in his directorial debut as well.
Yeah. I didn't know that he wrote or directed this.
Yeah. We'll get more into the whole writing part of it later on, I'm sure. But yeah, he wrote and directed this film. I don't know if I know where he got the idea from or why he decided to make this.
He did.
He did, yeah. I do know that I've sort of heard things he's said and his sort of what he's trying to say, I guess, what this movie is trying to say about society and about people.
Hopefully it's not a autobiographical film.
Yeah, I hope it's. I would hope it's not. So, basically, Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays Don John, who is just like the coolest guy ever. Like he's just this incredibly well to some people. I would argue some people.
I was going to say to a certain type. He's a bro.
He's absolutely a bro. He's from, where are they from? Like New York, like Boston,
New Jersey.
New Jersey, yeah. And so he's just like this guy. He just gets tons of women, and he's also got a porn addiction.
Yeah, so that's the big one.
That's the main thing. And so this is gonna be. I'm gonna see how much I can skirt around that sort of part of the film. I don't know how well I will.
That's fair.
But I'll only touch on it if we really need to. And if it's
we'll mention it if it's necessary.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
So this one might not be the most appropriate listening. Depends on who you are, of course, but it's not really. It doesn't focus on that as much as like you would. As I would.
I was going to say it's about pornography in the same way that Fight Club is about beating the crap out of people.
Yeah, exactly. It's a part of the film, but it's not really what it's about. It's about
a prop.
It's sort of a.
It's used to tell a wider story.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So I guess do we just want to just go start from the beginning? I guess.
Yeah, just work our way through it again.
Yeah. So immediately it just opens up with him talking about
It's
just
what's important to him. He like
what's
lifts up.
important to him, yeah. And he says like there's only a few things that he really cares about, and it's like his body, his pad, his church,
Car, his car,
car,
his
yeah,
boy.
car, his boys, his family, his girls, and his porn. And
Or yeah. So basically, just straight off the bat,
yeah,
saying, guys, bit of a knob, but
yeah. And I will say that I appreciate this film just sort of gets to the point because it's only like an hour and
yeah,
a
it
half.
throws you straight in.
Yeah, it's an hour and a half, but it sort of uses all that. It doesn't sort of go longer than it needs to. It's sort of like this is
I
kind
was
of
gonna say nothing in the film particularly felt like it was wasted and so
yeah. It's all sort of
forward.
yeah. It's all necessary to the story, and doesn't. It's not just him
There is
putting it.
one thing that I wasn't quite sure about, but
Uh, is that later on? You want to get to that
that's a little bit
later?
like
Yeah. So actually, I want to sort of talk about a similar film, semi-similar, but
I was gonna
not.
say there's a film that I think we should mention.
Yeah. Uh, I think we're thinking of the same film, maybe.
Yeah, I have a feeling.
Shame,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
which is sort of similar. There's like sort of similar elements to that.
I'd say these two films, Don John and Shame, they're kind of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
I think they're both different ways of telling a similar kind of story.
Yeah.
Not
I
just because they're about men that have an addiction.
yeah. Although Shame is much more of a drama, and Don John is like a comedy. It's much more
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
comedic side.
Don John definitely kind of, embraces kind of happiness a little bit more, whereas
Yeah.
Shame is kind of driven by depression.
Yeah. And I think
Um,
uh, I don't know which I prefer. I think I'm not entirely sure. I think I put Shame slightly ahead. I think in terms of which I
yeah, no,
prefer.
I plan again.
Yeah.
Maybe because um, yeah, no, I'm not sure how much of this film is not based on, but kind of food. But I guess because there's only so many,
Yeah. There's only so many
without
ideas.
comparing them to each other, it's
Yeah.
quite a niche story.
Yeah. Exactly. And so it's yeah, and that is a possibility for something we could do in the future. Maybe, possibly. Who knows?
Ooh.
Might be a bit too dark, but I mean,
Barney and William cover on addiction films,
yeah.
series.
So
You want, you want to talk about the cast?
yeah, so Joseph Gordon-Levitt
John?
is the lead, and I really like Joseph
He is.
Gordon-Levitt in his stuff. I think he's
I
pretty
like him
good.
too. He never does anything that particularly blows me away, but he's
Mhm.
always kind of, yeah,
He's always
yeah,
solid.
steady
Yeah,
pair of hands. He gets
yeah,
the job done.
yeah. I think this might be his best role I've seen from him, and I've seen a few of his
Um,
other
I
films.
can't think of much else that I've seen him in other than like Inception.
Mm. Have you seen 500 Days of Summer?
Oh, I haven't, but yeah, that was the other thing that I'm thinking of.
Mm.
He's in.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, he's in the Dark Knight, right?
yeah, yeah. I think this is probably the best thing he's done, from what I've seen. Anyway, I don't. There's
I
nothing
haven't
else I
seen
can
enough.
majorly think
Really.
of off the top of my head. That is I would consider as good as this, if not better. But he really works in this film. The accent threw me. Like the first time I
Yeah,
heard
no,
it.
I was gonna say I'm not convinced by his accent or,
Yeah.
for that matter, Scarlett Johansson's accent.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
also in this film.
Yeah. The accents are very like weird because I'm like, he
It's
doesn't
very
sound.
I'm an actor doing an accent.
Yeah,
Ding.
it's just like
Really kind.
I don't think I quite buy that, or like it's just like
Don't quite go hand in hand.
yeah. And so I guess that's a good segue to Scarlett Johansson's character, who, what's like the best way to put her? She's a girl that
She starts out as the love interest.
she's the yeah, it's sort of portrayed in the trailers as well as the main love interest.
Yeah,
And
Scarlett Johansson.
yeah,
She
because
is
she's
the girl. So
arguably the biggest actor in this film, like the star, arguably, like
yeah,
in
she's
terms of
done.
name
She's in the
recognition.
MCU at this point.
Yeah,
So
and she'd done plenty of other major films.
yeah, she's done Lost in Translation.
Yeah, and
She was a name.
yeah, and
Now I think she definitely is the biggest.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, for sure. I think just overall, sort of for a general point, that the cast is all pretty solid. Like, there's nothing too bad in my opinion.
There's nothing outrageously wrong, I'd say,
Mhm.
apart from the accent's not quite
The accents are a
working.
bit weird, yeah.
But,
It's a bit.
other than that, the actual kind of emotional, physical performance,
Yeah.
it's all fairly strong all round.
Yeah,
Yeah, they get the job done.
and it's yeah. I just
Julianne
think
Moore,
Julianne Moore, yeah. It was
he kind of pops up halfway through-ish.
yeah. When
Good part.
John starts his class,
Yes.
and sort of.
Well, yeah, I get it.
I mean, we'll get into it more later on. But she's sort of established as sort of like a bit weird, a bit.
Yeah,
Geeky, I
no,
guess.
he's kind of repulsed to begin with. He's not like
He's a
weird.
bit. John's very like. This is a weird.
He's very superficial, is
Oh,
John.
he's very superficial.
And he doesn't. Yeah, I say a bit. No, he is very
He's
superficial.
incredible, yeah.
And if his addictions or anything to go by, ignoring that, the way he at first reacts to.
Yeah, he's introduced and he's out at the club with his boys, and like as the moment he gets there, they immediately start talking about a woman, like pretty much instantaneously, and are just putting numbers on things, like immediately.
Yeah, and it's the most kind of and the point is you are meant to look down on them for this.
Yeah,
and I think praise this film. It does a frighteningly good job of portraying these guys as
yeah. And I think there's some people who really don't get this movie at all, and
oh yeah,
we'll talk about this more for the ending, because the ending really is like a major point, and we'll get to it then. But there are some people who kind of want to be, or kind of think they see themselves as John.
I mean, I compared this film to Fight Club.
Oh yeah.
Really, how that can be misread. I think the people that misread Fight Club will misread this film.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I want to be like. So yeah, Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah. Yeah.
She first rejected.
So.
And he gets a bit creepy, and
yeah,
like,
he is.
looks her up on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, before that, when they first.
I'm skipping ahead a bit there.
A little bit, yeah. Skipping ahead quite a little bit. So.
I fair bit, actually, yeah.
Yeah, so they're in the club, and then they're talking about all these women in various ways, and then they spot Scarlett Johansson at the bar, and there's a really interesting thing that it does here where sort of the whole bar is sort of like a bluish in tint, and then for her character, she's like lit up in like basically like angelic light, to put it
yeah. It reminded me of Trainspotting, and at one point when McGregor sees first time.
Okay. Yeah. And that sort of is representative of John's feelings, I guess is
Yeah, like he sees her and is like, okay, yeah, she is the girl.
yeah.
With
And then he just walks over and then they start dancing.
the moves are.
Yeah. And then he just forces himself on her, which is like
Yeah, as I say, just starts kissing her, and she's pushing him away and
and he's still
being as
doing
polite
it
as she can.
and it's just like I'm pretty that's like that is a crime.
I was
Like
gonna say that is assault.
that is like that's not okay. Like you can't just do
Yeah,
that.
it's not like out and out asexual assault, but he is forcing him.
Yeah.
He's James Bonding her.
Oh, he is, isn't he? That's Bond does that to like every well, a lot of women, and it's like
Yeah.
I don't know, something about it is just like uncomfortable, like that this could actually happen.
By design, definitely.
I mean, it's the point, yeah, and it's just like it's weird because presumably he does this to like all the girls, but they don't have a problem with it, and it's just a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't see him doing it as
Yeah.
but presumably some of them go with it, some of them don't.
Yeah.
He's one of the ones that.
We just only see the ones that do go with it. And so she leaves because she doesn't want anything to do with him. Rightfully so.
Yeah.
Like she
I was in
is
her position. I
at,
definitely
at
want
that
it.
point justified to like tell him to fuck off and to leave because
Yeah.
he's being just weird with her, and then
It's sex predatory.
yeah, and then he finds another woman and just settles for that instead.
I was gonna say, yeah, he settles. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So how kind of scummy he is? Yeah, he settles for her.
Yeah,
And this
like it's a
time moves work.
yeah, like it's like beneath it, like sort of. I say settle because that's sort of how he views it. I don't
Yeah,
think
exactly.
that's
It's not who he intended to.
yeah,
With, but
yeah,
yeah, I mean, basically, his kind of train of thought is she'll do.
yeah. Which is like I wouldn't say like I mean in my circumstance. I'm not saying it would happen, but I don't think that's settling. Like it's still an attractive woman, but it's just not what he wanted, and so he's
I was gonna say it
disappointed.
wasn't his original.
Yeah, and he sort of explains that like it doesn't that he's doing this, that he's sleeping with all these women, but nothing connects with him on like an emotional level, and it sort of just
Yeah,
doesn't really
he's a bit of a sociopath.
yeah, and sort of he doesn't get necessarily the fulfillment he wants in stuff he watches because
Yeah.
that's fake. Well, not fake, but it's sort of like it's just people pretending essentially.
The warped portrayal of.
Yeah. Oh, which is a sort of an aspect that this film covers
Yeah, they do mention.
considerably, the sort of warped images of sex and romance and how certain things have influenced people to believe this is how it is in real life, even though it clearly isn't.
Oh yeah. So he's not getting the satisfaction he wants out of having sex with random women.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's at this point that he decides to try and pursue actual. Not, he doesn't quite go for a relationship at this point, but he wants to
Yeah,
get a hold of Scarlett Johansson.
yeah. Well, because he basically, it's a chase for him essentially. He doesn't want to do a relationship. He just wants to sleep with her, and
I
that's all
say he wants
to do.
her.
That is just all he wants at that point.
Yeah, it's only until he's kind of basically he gets her name off the at the bar that
Yeah,
he met at.
yeah,
Meets her on Facebook and on a date.
yeah. Essentially,
Um, and she's just basically not wanting to do what he wants and just get to banging immediately. She wants
Yeah,
to,
form a proper connection with him,
yeah, yeah, and
which
this
is
is
like
when,
pretty understandable.
yeah, no, that's
Get
good.
that? Yeah, because he's just sort of does what she wants just to get with her, not because he wants it.
Yeah, he goes along with the relationship
Mhm.
just because he wants to own her.
Yeah, which is like just not very nice. Like it's
Yeah,
just
still quite. It's very Barney Stinson from
yeah,
Mother.
yeah. But like the film acknowledges that what he's doing is wrong, and that he's not a
Yeah,
good
it
guy.
definitely doesn't make any pretense that you're meant to root for him. I'd say that John is definitely
John's definitely a what? Sorry,
anti-hero.
anti-hero. Yeah, he's the protagonist, but he's not a
He's
good
not
guy.
necessarily a hero.
Yeah, because I feel like this film could so easily write him as like this is what you're meant to be doing, like portraying
Yeah,
him
look
as
how
the
cool
positive right.
John is.
This is what you do. You just force yourself on a woman until they like you, and that's just how the world
Yeah.
works. And I remember we were taught at school because we did sex ed, and this is relevant. I'm not just telling a story for the sake of it. This is actually relevant. We would a woman came in and talked about it, and basically it was like, so like in porn, women just want to do whatever, and they're always willing for it. And she's like, in real life, it doesn't work that way. And I'm like, that's an important thing you should tell people, or like kids, like people growing up, that not everything is as it seems.
Porn is not an accurate portrayal of sex.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't just happen. You can't just ask someone to do it and they'll do it, or you can't just force them into doing it, because that's it's technically a crime. Forcing them to do
I
it.
was going to say, when you force them into doing it, that's
Yeah.
a little thing called rape.
Yeah, and it's just sort of not very pleasant. And I think some people miss that sort of lesson that, I guess consent is the best way to put it, is the simplest way to put it, that is necessary. And so
So
then
that's his relationship.
he starts the relationship. I think just before that, or around this time, we are also introduced to his family, like properly.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so he goes to church, and he's
He's a big churchgoer.
yeah, and
He
he's
regularly confesses sin.
his sin, which is just like, man, he says his time is important to him, but he seems to spend a lot of time doing just like sleeping with women, like in other things. It's just like,
He spends a lot of his time in front of his computer, if you know what I'm saying.
yeah, and it's just like, man, I know he's an adult and he could probably you probably have more time to do that if you wanted to, but it's like, really, like I mean, it is an addiction, like it is
Oh yeah,
an addiction, so it makes
has
sense.
a problem.
It has a problem, yeah. And so actually, I think as he's driving to the church, we have the first of many scenes of him, of just like the camera next to him while he drives, and him just getting
Road rage.
upset at people and just saying they are retarded. And it's like,
That's one of the little things that I'm not sure what it's meant to be. Is it just selling him more on being a bit of a scumbag, or
I think that's sort of what I took from it. I think, well, because later at the very end of the film, he's completely like the final scene. The time we see him driving, he's different. Like his final driving scene is compared, and I think it's just to do that, to sort of show character progression.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's saying anything.
Yeah, I
bigger.
guess this is the before part or not.
Yeah. And man, he gets really upset in pretty much every driving scene. He yells at someone for something.
Yeah, every time he's driving, he's like, "Whoa, what are you doing?"
Yeah, and just insults them repeatedly and just gets upset. It's just like, just chill, man. It's not that big.
He's got a lot of pent up
rage. And so yeah, we meet John's family. I think this is a good time to touch on them. They're a bit of a weird family, aren't they? Like it's
Yeah, yeah, dysfunctional.
a very
That's what.
dysfunctional family. So we've got Tony Danza as his dad, who is, I think he helped.
American.
Yeah, the sort of stereotypical American dad who. It just seems obvious to me that he helped perpetuate these ideas to John. And that's why John thinks the way he does because of his
Yeah,
dad.
I think yeah, he was kind of a shaping factor in
Yeah,
who.
because the way he just like treats women and just like talks about women is just like,
Yeah, I
oh,
was just like later on when
that's
John introduces Scarlett Johansson to his family.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
just like
he's a bit sexual predatory as
that's
well.
that's a bit. Oh, that's a bit. That's not good,
It's
is it?
Paul.
Yeah, and it's just like he's just really just ugh. Like I'm lucky I don't have a dad like that because that just wouldn't be good.
Yes, I mean,
And so then there's also John's mum, who was also like she's more along the lines of Barbara's character, which we will get to. Like she's not. I don't know how to put it exactly.
she's not exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure how I feel about.
Because she sort of is. Well, because there's a bit where a little later on when Barbara first meets John's parents, and she talks about the first time he met her dad, he met John's dad, and how it was so romantic, and then he tells the story, and I'm like, is that romantic? That's not like I don't. I think that's actually also incredibly effed up. Like
Yeah,
that's just really weird. And I don't- and
it's
I
just back in the warped perception of
yeah,
love.
what is love and what it makes a healthy relationship, which is sort of perpetuated by certain
Throughout the whole
films.
thing.
Yeah, and then we've also got
And then
Brie Larson.
Brie Larson, before she was a big name, I guess.
Yeah, I'm trying. I think she done
She
Scott
done Scott
Pilgrim,
Pilgrim.
and I think 21 Jump Street had also come out before this. But I
Yeah.
think this was a couple years I think before she won the Oscar for Room.
Oh, yeah. This was 2 years before she won.
Yeah. She's not really in it that much. When I saw her name in the credits, I sort of put in my mind that she's going to be in this film lots because I guess
Yeah, no, because nowadays, she's Brie Larson.
yeah, she's this massive star that's in tons of things, and she's like less than 10 minutes, like like five.
She's in the film. She's present for all of the family scenes,
All the
but
stuff with
she
the
only
family.
speaks
She's on her phone the entire time. She doesn't really, even when they're in church, she's just away on her
on her
phone.
phone.
I mean, to be fair, that's sort of what I'd do if I was in church, because
So I'm not a big churchgoer.
it's incredibly long for not much. It's not worth it, is it? I mean,
I
I'm
was
just
gonna say that it's the same thing each week,
yeah. I mean, I'm not religious, so maybe that's something that people who do go to church get out of it. But that's just my opinion.
Well, yeah, no, I think we are both coming to this from the plane of
Yeah.
about much.
Yeah.
It works for you. It works.
Yeah. And so then, what was your next note that you made actually?
I didn't make notes for this film. I just wanted to kind of take it in because
Oh,
I
okay.
felt last time I spent a lot.
Oh, okay. So I made some notes of a
I've
few.
got things I want to touch on.
Okay, sure.
No, what's your next?
I just made a few quotes. I made note of a few quotes throughout the film that sort of talk about women. So the first quote I made. So there's a bit where John and John Senior, I guess, are watching an ad.
It's a John Cena then.
John Cena Senior, John Senior.
He's invisible.
They're watching an ad for like something, like a fast food, like sandwich or something.
Yeah.
And it's and a woman is a very scantily clad woman is being used to
Oh
advertise
yeah,
for
she's
this
like eating a burger and like
on the
pouring
beach.
water all over herself.
Yeah, and
So,
she's like
yeah.
taking her top off and everything, and it's just like, and they're just sort of both fixated by it, and it's that's sort of a prop that like lots of fast food commercials use women in that sort of way to get people to watch and to buy their products because
If the
it
sexy
just
woman eats the sandwich, so should you.
yeah, and it just sort of is a way. It's a marketing strategy. It's the simplest way of putting it. It's just to get people to check out this product. How do we do this?
Basically, it's like toned down porn. What it
Essentially,
is.
yeah. It's very like it's still it's weird and it's very like
Yeah, and that's definitely kind of like, it's
yeah.
not exactly surprising.
No, it's not surprising. Which I guess is a bad thing that it's not surprising.
Yeah, it's the
That we're just like,
classic
yeah,
genre.
that's just how it is. It like isn't.
That's sandwich commercial.
Yeah. And so there's a line in the commercial which has more than just a piece of meat, which
Oh
is
shit!
did you not
Yeah,
clock that?
I no, yeah, I forgot about it. I did notice it
Hmm.
during the film, but yeah, I forgot about it.
Yeah. And so there's sort of a few things I noticed on this time that I hadn't noticed the previous times I was watching. But again, this is a time where I was sort of taking it in and making more notes and sort of looking at it in a more analytical sense. And so I'm just looking at the notes I made. My next note is just.
I go.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Hang on.
No, you wanted
There
to
you go.
say something.
I was gonna say, is this around the point when he goes on that date with Scarlett Johansson and they go to a movie, to a rom com?
Yeah. Well, they meet at a restaurant first, and
Yeah, they're out.
then they go to a movie theater.
And they, do you like movies?
And then he talks about how he doesn't watch movies because he doesn't see the point in watching movies.
And you and I were watching this film and
Yeah,
bring up because I believe he'd say such.
yeah, I was
Um, I
disappointed.
did notice on more prominently the movie that they end up going and seeing Anne Hathaway and Channing Tatum pop
Channing
up
Tatum.
for a.
Yeah, as
Oh,
the
but
romantic
also
duo. There's a
the poster
poster.
that he wants for the movie that he wants to go see,
Yeah,
Emily Blunt and John Krasinski, I think it
yeah,
was.
yeah, it was, and it's like, man, that must have been that must have cost a fair amount of money because John Krasinski, at least, like he'd been doing The Office since like for
I was gonna
ages.
say this was The Office ended this year, I believe.
Yeah, and Emily Blunt had been doing stuff, right? She's
Yeah,
tried,
she'd been in stuff. I think.
and it's like, but also Channing Tatum and Anne Hathaway, like
Anne Hathaway, who I think Anne
Oscar
Hathaway was an
winner.
Oscar winner at this point.
Yeah, but I think, well, because this film premiered at it says here it's Sundance in January, so she hadn't won the Oscar yet, but she had been in like like
Les
she
Mis
had
was
been Les Mis she had been in,
she'd done stuff before that.
and Channing Tatum was also
I
a
realized Prada and stuff.
yeah, and
Channing
Channing
Tatum, yeah,
Tatum was also a big star as well, or a bigger
yeah,
star.
I guess that's why they're in the rom com.
Yeah,
John Krasinski and
because
Emily.
it's probably cheaper to get them in, and plus they sort of have more. They sort of have the look for a rom com, in that
And
like
more traditionally
more
attractive.
traditional. Not to say that Krasinski and Blunt aren't attractive. It's just they
Oh
don't
yeah,
fit
no, but in
the
terms of Hollywood attractive people,
yeah, but they don't fit the typical bill for like a rom com,
yeah.
and so I'm just gonna sort of be honest. I'm absolutely with John. I don't get rom coms at all.
Rom coms are the one genre that I don't really click with.
Yeah, like the only romance movies I like are ones about failing romances and breakups. Like the way more depressing side of relationships because that's just more interesting, arguably.
Yeah,
Like
no, I get that. Like Marriage Story.
Marriage Story, yeah, that's a great example of a relationship really breaking
I guess
down.
with me, rom-coms, I guess the sort of thing that I go for is there's like a romantic story there,
Hmm.
and it just happens. Like Forrest Gump, for example, I'd say that's a
Hmm. Right.
um Groundhog Day. That is also,
Yeah.
by by definition a rom-com.
Yeah.
But there are other things happening in those films that I think work.
Yeah.
Saying, "Oh, it's a rom-com."
Yeah. I'm sort of that way too. Like romantic subplots, I don't necessarily have a problem with, but they're usually sort of in films that aren't billed as that. They're usually built as something else, and that has a
Films
romantic plot.
that are comedies and happen to have a romantic
Yeah,
story in it.
exactly. That's usually when it works because I don't think rom. I just think rom coms are just shit usually,
Right? Yeah. Rom-coms are the most formulaic genre.
and also they really like justify and perpetuate terrible like things that
Yeah.
men
Oh,
should do to get
rom-coms
with women.
are a porn without porn. It's the
Yeah,
kind of the same subliminal messaging. It's an inaccurate portrayal
yeah.
of love.
It's I guess you could say the female equivalent in that they sort of look at it.
In that a man is more likely to watch porn, a
Yeah,
woman is more likely to watch rom-com.
yeah. And like I'm not speaking from experience by the way about relationships or anything, but like I know that like rom-coms don't accurately portray relationships and
I
how
was
you
going to say,
should.
you're not going to based on a true story at the end of like You've Got Mail or something.
Yeah, and this film sort of looks at that, and it's just like because and John it just sort of explains the plot of the movie, and it's like that is like every rom com ever. Like there's the pretty woman, there's the pretty man, the love at first sight, the first kiss, the breakup, the makeup, the wedding. You know, they ride off into the sunset. You know, it's just like that's like every single rom com ever. Because they're
I mean,
just
to me, the reason I guess I've been wanting to get to this particular scene is because to me, this is where kind of the thesis of this film comes out. I think
mm-hmm,
basically this film is a romantic comedy if maybe it was a bit more realistic and
mm-hmm,
wasn't as, film perfect and dealt with all these two perfect people,
yeah,
perfect relationship and this
mm-hmm,
perfect narrative story
yeah,
sort of thing. It's yeah, like taking in the fact that, somebody is, very, capable of having a porn addiction.
yeah,
And what if that person was in, yeah, a rom-com?
yeah. And I sort of have seen some people describe this as like a rom com but for guys. It's sort of that it's well because it's not like it's like not the most like yeah it is without a doubt a
Basically
rom
feminine.
com, yeah, but it's
I don't know, I
also
think that's a fair way.
yeah because it's like it sort of analyzes problems and doesn't portray them as like and it has for me anyway has a great explanation of and sort of breakdown of like she wants him to do all these things which we'll get into later but she doesn't have to do anything for him, like he has to make all these changes and arguably sacrifices depending on who you ask for her, but she doesn't have to do anything for him, which is I think a problem with that was a very loud bike that which I think is a problem that even is still kind of a problem at some points. Like I've had conversations with people about relationships and sort of how for some people men have to do all these things, you know, for a girl, but she doesn't have to do anything for him, or
I
I
think
don't
that's
know.
a bit unfair.
That is a bit unfair.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, it goes both ways. I was watching an episode of Ted Lasso where Roy makes Keely a bath. For those who haven't seen Ted Lasso, there's a bit where a guy makes his girlfriend a bath with roses and candles and everything around it because, you know, life's hard. and he's sort of been annoying her. It's the simplest way to
It's
put
been
it.
a bit too
Clingy. Clingy is probably the best word to put.
yeah, yeah.
And so then I got into this conversation of, yeah, that's a lot of effort for me, and like, and I sort of got into this sort of discussion with people on like, well, yeah, that's nice. Like, I understand the sentiment, and that's cool, and I understand that I should do stuff for my partner, but like, shouldn't she also do stuff for me as well? Like, just because it's just fair and nice to just do nice things.
I was gonna say relationship goes both ways.
Yeah. And some people just don't think that, and I think that's sort of a big problem that, you know, people assume that, oh, he does stuff for her and she doesn't have to do anything for him, and sort of the argument as to why doesn't really hold water either, of like why a guy has to do all this for women but for his girl, but she doesn't have to do anything for him. Arguments rarely hold water. I mean, that's just my sort of perspective on the whole thing, I guess.
Yeah.
And so,
where does it go from here? So yeah,
they see the movie,
there.
and there's an editing trick I noticed where she's watching this movie, and it's edited in a similar way to when John is watching.
Wait, he watches. Oh shit!
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I did notice that.
Sort of the quick editing, the flashing lights, the intercut with clips of what they're watching, and it's, you know, it's very telling that like this is how, you know, they sort of view two separate things in the same way of how they believe things should be.
They have a big old argument later on about, you know, he compares, you know, yeah, we'll get there, but he goes on and compares love of rom-com is fiction to porn, love of porn of being fun.
Yeah. And so then they leave the theater, and then they kiss for the fourth time now, because he kissed her like 3 or 4, maybe it's 5
times in
the bar. So it's not as special anymore, is it? Because he's done it before, so it's not the same thing. It doesn't work as well.
You know, they both want it this time.
They both want it. So it's better because she's like consenting to him doing it, which is better.
Yeah, he's not forcing himself upon herself.
Yeah.
She isn't pushing him away.
There was actually a really great YouTube video I saw that I think has been taken down now, which is super disappointing because it was really great. And I think it was titled like Don John or What is Love, which it basically breaks down and sort of explains the 3 characters sort of their perspectives of John, Barbara, and Esther, who is the Julianne Moore character, who we'll meet soonish. And it was just a really great breakdown of everything, and it just is. Yeah, it's just it was a great video that is no longer up, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I would have liked to watch that.
Yeah, I mean, if I could find it, I might send it to you because it's really good. And so he keeps wanting, you know, to get with her, but she's very like stretching it out considerably. She's like sort of making him do all these things for her before she gives him what he wants, and it's sort of because he wants this thing because just for his own personal pleasure, but I think at a point he starts sort of genuinely caring for her at a certain point, or at least in a little bit of a way.
Yeah, no, I think he does start an attachment.
Yeah, which I feel like is a very common trope of like people wanting to get with other people for just sex, but they have to like sort of play the long game, I guess is the way to put it, and then they come to like genuine feelings for someone.
Oh yeah, and that's, you know, very, you know,
it's a common
very
sitcom
Barney
trope.
Stinson from How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah. And so then she has him get a class, or forces him to get a class.
Yeah, he starts attending a night school.
Yeah, because she wants him to have a proper job, as she calls it, which is just a bit insulting, isn't it?
I was gonna say, you know, I think, he's a bartender, right?
Yeah, he's a bartender. He's
Yeah,
We
I
don't
mean,
really
I think
see him
that's a
at his job.
perfectly reasonable profession.
Yeah, you must get paid a decent amount.
He's got a very nice apartment. You know, he
Yeah,
seems to be. Yeah, you know, I don't think you could have that nice an apartment without
yeah,
having a fairly decent income.
yeah. Also, he must
It's
spend
just
a
yeah,
lot
she
of
takes
money.
issue with what the job itself is.
Yeah, and he also must spend a lot on tissues as well. So you must have a decent job to be able to buy that many
I was gonna
tissues.
say he spends an ungodly amount of tissue.
Because there's a bit where he empties his like waste paper basket into like a trash bag, and it's like full to the top, and I'm like,
I was gonna say there's a lot of
that's a
damn
lot.
tissues in
That's
there.
like a lot,
Like
and it's just
into a big old trash bag as well, which
yeah,
looks reasonably full.
it's a very big bag, and he like lifts it like it's heavy. I presume there's other trash in there, but still, that's like a lot of
Still, you know.
tissues. And tissues are
Well, I
like
mean, when
relative,
he goes to the priest at the church, he does mention how often he
yeah, and it's just like
uses
he
those.
does have a genuine problem, and I think this is sort of
Oh,
an like because films usually when they look at addiction it's usually with like drugs and drinking like Trainspotting, as we mentioned earlier,
yeah.
is like the prime example of like a film that deals
That's
with
the go-to. Yeah, that and like
drug.
Requiem for a Dream, and like the go-to
Oh, and Requiem
addiction.
for a Dream also, yeah. But films rarely delve into like sex and porn addictions, which I think is interesting because I feel like
I
it's not.
guess because that's a less of an immediate. You say addiction. That's
Yeah,
like name an addiction. People say like drugs or alcohol. They won't be like sex or.
yeah, exactly. But it's just like there's a wide market of films about drug addiction, but there's a very small market of films about porn and sex addiction as well. Which is just an
Which
interesting
is
thing.
odd because you'd think that it's much easier to develop a porn addiction than it is to a drug
Absolutely.
addiction.
Yeah, because
Able to
it's
get
much
hold
easier
of
to
drugs.
access. Just via the internet. If
Oh
you
yeah,
have the internet, you can
like
access
like
it.
like John says in the film, it's incredibly easy to get porn on the go.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's watching it on his phone in like his car. He's watching it at his class, which is just like, come
It's
on.
class.
And it's at like full brightness too. And I'm like, mate, if you're gonna do this, turn the brightness down a little bit. Like it's so
Yeah, exactly. Make it a little bit difficult for people to see what you're watching.
yeah,
Then,
or at least sit at like the corner, like at the very back of the classroom, or in like a toilet or something.
yeah, don't sit as far forward and in, like front and center as you are.
Yeah, exactly. Which explains why Julianne Moore is able to see it because he's being
Yeah,
yeah,
he's not trying to hide it.
and he's not being subtle with it either. He like looks for like a couple seconds, looks around and like tilts his phone down, then looks back to it, and they just
Yeah,
keep
which
and it
pantomime like, is anyone watching me watch porn?
no,
Okay,
I'll
let's
go back to it, and
continue.
then he just keeps doing it. And it's just like, come on, like do it more subtly at least.
Yeah,
And so she starts meeting his friends, and he starts meeting her friends, and
Scott.
yeah, and John is very much well because his boys, who I think are a really great addition, his two boys that he's got.
They don't really add that much, but I think they're kind
I think they've got
of
some
needed there.
decent lines and some funny moments, but that sort of
They're a bit relevant.
they're
I'd
not
say.
they're not a major part of the film.
Yeah, they're just kind of there to fill in the gaps between Tom and girlfriend.
Yeah. And so they're just talking about all this stuff, and he's talking with them about. He just has a few scenes where he's talking about how. Well, actually, this is later on, actually, so I guess we'll get to it later. But sort of, for now, he's sort of talking to them about, being in love, as he calls it, which I don't know, like, how long they've been together at this point. If I would constitute it as love, but I guess, it depends.
It's their 1 month anniversary, they say, since they first met.
From the moment he first laid eyes on her, is what he says.
Yeah.
Which I'm wondering if he's being serious. I think because he says it very seriously, but I wouldn't be surprised
I
if
was
it's
going
meant
to
to
say,
be.
and he doesn't like say I'm kidding or anything.
And it's
I think he
like
does mean that.
also that's really weird. Like, because people celebrate relationship anniversaries like every week. It seems like from my experience, I know people. I have friends who are in relationships, and sometimes they just do it
Yeah.
like after a year. Like, oh, 1 year ago we started, and I guess it sort of depends. Well, because to me, it's also confusing. Like, when do you start counting it being dating? Like, is it like the first date? Like, is that a date, or is it sort of
Mm.
like it sort of depends? I
I've
think.
never been in a relationship long enough to really kind of figure that out.
Mm. But you have been in a relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, it's just weird that and also that people care so much about it too. It's like
I get really annoyed at like
you've
they
been,
they, they have their 1 month anniversary.
and it's like, oh my goodness, you've been together for a month, for 30
I mean that
days.
annoys me for several reasons. Yeah, exactly. It's a month. That's just like
Come on.
uh, also, how can it be an anniversary if an anniversary is specifically a yearly thing?
Yeah. Like, I guess 6 months is a little more reasonable, but even then, I think that's a
Yeah,
bit
no,
ridiculous.
no, I'll give them that, but
But a year is like at like what it should be most of the time. Like, oh, a year.
a lap around the sun. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
simple.
exactly. And it's just like, I just wouldn't care about that. I wouldn't focus on that. I'd be like, she'd be like, oh, it's our anniversary. And I'm like, oh, is it? Oh, all right.
That's
Like,
a good way to get the relationship to end.
yeah. Well, it's just like
If
a
she
thing.
brings it up and it seems like a big deal to her, don't be like, oh, okay.
I wouldn't like. It depends when it is, of course. If it's a year, then like I'll care. But if it's like a month or something, I'll be like, oh, like it depends when it is, of course. It's not just like if it's been a year, I won't just be like, ah, all right. Yeah, it depends, you know. Like people who do like
Oh,
1 week anniversaries, like, come on, like that's
oh,
just
that's just stupid.
that's ridiculous. Like you've barely even know what like this is. It's just
I
like
say 7 days, probably 7 days, which you haven't spent every day together.
it's like, you know, and I just think relationships as a whole are so like weird that people care so much too. And like this film, sort of, it's sort of what people like because John doesn't care about relationships. He just wants to get with women, which is fine. He's perfectly in his rights to do so. I don't know if he should be going about it the way he
As
is.
long as he's not assaulting them,
As long as they're like can
as long as
fine.
both parties are up for it, you can do. Yeah, that's
Yeah, it's
fine.
fine. I don't care. Although it is weird because like people seem to know, or at least some people seem to know that that he does this, but they go with him anyway. And he makes a point. There's a woman he meets who gets upset at him because he didn't call her back, and then she talks about how he gets like every week he gets like a new bitch. I think she says, and like then he asks like, well then why'd you come with me then? And it's like, well, I guess it sort of depends. Like, if she knew before then it is like weird that she would not be surprised that he doesn't call back if he doesn't do it at all. Like, it's just weird. It's very
Um, so I guess should we talk about Julianne more? It's
yeah.
around the point he starts
She's
attending classes
introduced.
and meets her.
Yeah, because he's going to the classes, and she's just introduced very. Well, she's crying. Is the first time we meet her. In fact, I think we might have possibly jumped over something. Actually, I think we might have. Yeah, I think we jumped over the bit where John's family meets Barbara. I think we slightly jumped over that. We can just finish talk about this and then jump back
Actually,
to the
there's another little bit, yeah, before Julianne will get to choose that
yeah.
one.
So they meet, and John once again has some road rage because he just has a problem.
Yeah,
And then
I'm just angry.
they buy they bring like something for them to eat. I don't know exactly what it is, but she brings
Yeah, we
food
will.
to eat. And she's wearing a dress and he's just wearing, you know, like leather, like his usual clothes. And then they walk in and
Cool guy.
yeah, the cool guy outfit, I guess is the way to put it. And then they walk in and Joel's mom is so excited, and then his dad is so inappropriate.
That makes no interest until he sees her.
Yeah, he's like, oh, whatever. And then he's like, there's a bit where he's like looking at Evie, and like his wife is like nagging him to look, and he's like, Jesus. And then he sees Barbara, and it's like, Christ, and he stands up, and
His
he's
eyes
just like,
might as well
he's
have
like,
like the cartoon thing of popping out of his head.
yeah, like as close to like an actual human thing. Like that's the closest way that can happen for a human. His eyes get like massive, and he's just like staring at her.
Like shit.
And then they're just, and then
he just kind of pervs over her throughout the whole dinner.
Yeah, and he talks to John about it too. Like, if you're gonna like,
yeah, the fact that these two guys are bonding over
John has no problem with his dad saying, "Oh, where you get a piece of ass like that, like that's acceptable, like that's a thing that he can say."
Yeah, that's normal in this household.
And it's just like, that's just awful. Like that is like just not good. And there's a sort of recurring motif of the film, I guess is the way to put it, of when John first meets the second time he meets Barbara at the restaurant, and he says, like, can I be honest with you, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Not person, thing. And then he says that to his dad, and it's like, Jesus, like, this is really just...
So his dad, you're the most
his dad,
thing
yeah.
I've ever seen. And
then his dad asks if, like, her, like, boobs are real, and it's like, come on, like, that's too far. Even,
like Jesus, your son.
Like, this is your son. Like, if it's with your, like, it depends, like, if you're doing it with, like, with your guy friends, that's not necessarily massively better, but it's also just bros being bros. Like, it's just, it's a bit weird, yeah. But, like, your dad doing it, like, that's just...
It's a different level.
That's actually kind of a bit disturbing, if I'm being completely
Actively
honest.
disturbing.
And then they have the dinner, and then they tell the story of when John's parents first met. Again, in an incredibly, like, just icky way. They're telling the story, and then he says something like, oh, I first saw her, like, the moment I saw her, I said, that's mine. Again, treating women as objects, not as people. Because of society and sort of the societal norms that are perpetuated by various mediums. And it's just that whole dinner scene is it's got some really uncomfortable moments in it. Right?
Yeah, no, it's very realistic.
And then they leave, and they, send their goodbyes, and he kisses Barbara. Well, John's dad kisses Barbara, that is. On the lips, which is just like, come on. Like, if it's on the cheek, that's fine. That's just a nice thing that people do. But on the lips, like, come on, mate. That's just weird. And then,
in the same room for 2 hours, probably, around that. You shared a meal together.
Yeah, at least
not exactly,
And then they leave, and
actually, a relationship being forged in the fire, so you can kiss on the lips.
Yeah, and in fact, there's a bit earlier where she's like putting something on the table, and he like puts his hand on like her back or something, and
it, like leans around and like
yeah, and it's just like, my goodness, like, I really hope this doesn't happen to me. I doubt it would, because my dad is nothing like John's dad. But just like, how uncomfortable must that be? How uncomfortable must she be? I mean, unless she doesn't see a problem with it. But I mean, it's just so weird, and
I think that's still problematic if she doesn't have it.
Yeah, it's very problematic. But like, the film isn't saying, oh, this is what you should do or anything. It's very much like, this is a problem, and just sort of highlighting the fact that
I guess that's an issue I have with the film, that his dad never
like, in a way that you felt it was too you were like too uncomfortable by certain bits, or like, what do you mean?
Well, no, I'm fine with him not being called out in the moment. Within the film, he just kind of continues on being who he is. He doesn't go.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe a scene is missing where John
is
like, shut up.
Yeah. I'm sure there might be a couple deleted scenes where he like calls out his dad for his, disgusting behavior, like his incredibly inappropriate behavior with his girlfriend. Like, I'm positive there's something somewhere where he calls him out for it. It's just weird because no one else really does. Like, his wife doesn't call him out on it. And, I mean, his daughter just doesn't care.
Yeah, no, I feel like.
You know, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I just feel like, I just think that was missing. That
Yeah.
it's kind of painting this image of this being a problem, but it doesn't address it. As
It
being
doesn't
a
do
problem
anything to try and
within
solve it, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, look how bad this is, and then doesn't really
Doesn't do anything.
do anything other than that. They just kind of point it out.
I think, I don't know, maybe this is, I think this is more of an American problem, possibly, in that, like, it seems like in America there might be bigger problems with this because of, certain ways of people living in America and sort of culture. I mean, maybe that's just my sort of perspective of it.
Yeah, that might just be us. Yeah, not exactly. About whole thing.
Like, it doesn't make it right, but it might just be like an American thing in certain places. That is, of course.
I think it is a fairly universal way.
Yeah.
So there's a brief little bit that I really liked. And so it's around this point. It's around the point where their relationship is kind of, they're making steps forward in the relationship. Like they're at, I think it's Scarlett Johansson's character, Barbara, like her family. Like there's a birthday party or something.
Oh yeah, they're at this birthday party with,
and they just have having a conversation or something with someone else, and then it just kind of cuts off mid sentence, mid scene, and like making out in a bedroom.
Yeah, in like
and
a
I really like that.
Yeah,
child's bedroom. I really like that. Just as a within the, if this is a film about a porn addict who wants to get with this woman, then all of this Tarantino just kind of conversation stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't.
That's not what the film is about.
Yeah. And so, there's tons of stuff with him just meeting her friends and doing stuff for her. And he isn't getting any satisfaction out of any of this. He's just waiting for the time when they can finally sleep together. Because that's all this is about for him at this point.
That's the reason he's in this relationship.
Yeah. And then they have that scene outside of her apartment where she convinces him to take the class, which is really weird, I might say. Where she's talking to him about his class and everything. I'm like, man, she is kind of, am I wrong to say she is kind of leading him on slightly? Like just a little bit?
Yeah. I think that's not unfair to say.
Because she makes him, she does stuff with him and makes him, feel certain ways. But she actually doesn't do anything to, she doesn't do what he wants.
Follow through.
Yeah, she sort of gets him, sort of teases him and sort of gets him almost to that point and then decides, nah, I'm not. Just gonna do this later.
Yeah, I'm not into that.
Yeah. And it's just like, man, he must be getting rather annoyed at this point because
I say, man's got the bluest of all balls.
Yeah, I know, and because he stopped like going to the club with Whitman, right? Like because he's just been with Barbara this time, so he stopped trying to sleep with random women. Because I think he's sort of given up on that, right? Like I don't think when he goes to church he mentions anything.
I was gonna say, yeah, he does that. Like the first time that he goes to church since his relationship with her, he doesn't mention having sex at all.
He just mentions,
masturbating like 17 times and watching porn.
And he also actually, this is sort of a bit that sort of comes on at the end, but he goes to the gym every like day after church, it appears. And he's like reciting like Bible verses and stuff as he's like lifting weights and doing sit-ups and everything. And that video I mentioned earlier sort of explains and talks about how like he uses like the stuff from church to help him at the gym. Like he sort of is saying these things to himself to sort of motivate him to do more pull-ups or whatever it is.
With him being a member of the God Squad who goes to church a lot, I'm not sure what that's meant to be for the
Mm,
character, what that's
yeah,
trying to say about him.
yeah. It is
I'm,
weird because it's
I'm not.
kind of the opposite. Like his sort of
I
lifestyle
think
here
that
is
someone like him, goes to church wouldn't be into, sex out of wedlock.
yeah. It is weird, although like it is weird because there are certain members of the church who like it depends, I guess, on like
I think I see what you're saying there.
the church. Like I think it depends. Like like some churches don't necessarily have a problem with it, but there are some that do have a problem with it. Like, nope, you can't do this until until you're married or whatever.
I mean, I think this is one of the ones that has an issue with it, seeing as he confesses it as a
He
sin.
confesses it as a sin, but he can't stop because of
Fiction.
addiction, so he can't necessarily stop.
I
And
guess you do have to wonder how he kind of, starting off as a Catholic or whatever,
yeah,
he came to
mm,
be this addiction because you got to start somewhere.
yeah,
Don't just
exactly.
don't just have an addiction without trying anything.
Mm, yeah, and so he's then he starts going to those classes, and we meet Julianne Moore, who is crying, introduces crying, and he's just very annoyed about the whole thing. He's just like,
As I
oh,
say, I think
God.
that's the most relatable bit of the film.
Yeah,
I don't know how to react when someone's
yeah.
crying. It's walk past.
He's just like, Jesus Christ. And to be fair, I feel like I might kind of be like, I would like to hope I'm not like that, but there is like a popular.
If it's a person I don't know, I'm not going to be like, oh no,
Yeah,
but oh,
I'm not just gonna walk over and be like, "Oh, you're okay," because I don't. I just I avoid human interaction as much as I can, honestly. And it's just harder for me to like talk to people I don't know. Well, and so it
I'd
seems
say
like crying
just
is
going
like
up to a
that's
stranger.
and one that's crying too. Like that's just like no, that's I would just sort of
That's a level of emotional vulnerability there.
yeah. And so before he goes back to the class, Barbara. By the way, the name Barbara Sugarman. Thoughts on that?
The sugar bit definitely jumped.
Yeah, it's very weird. I searched Barbara Sugarman on like Facebook and online and stuff to see if there were any people with like that might appear. And there were like a couple people, not many. There were quite a few like fan sites for Scarlett Johansson's character in
Okay,
this film. I don't know
right.
if fan
Cool fan
sites. I don't know if fan sites the right like sort of sites about her character. I guess. I mean, fan sites is possibly another way of putting it, even though she's kind of a bit awful. And so then, he finishes up with his class and he goes to his apartment, and then Barbara's there waiting for him, and then they just start, they go at it, and they sleep together for the first time. And it's playing the music from earlier in the film with the romantic film, and the first time they kissed, and John is still disappointed.
What does he do? He whips out the laptop
He
and
whips out the laptop, and it's just also he's just chilling on
pornographic.
his couch as well. Like, I know he can't do it in his bedroom because that's a bit weird, but come on, like any other
He doesn't
place.
even have headphones in.
Yeah, exactly. He's just watching it like, oh god, there's gonna be a bit we get to in a minute, which I think is a bit weird, but he's just like chilling there, crossing his legs over, just typing up, going onto sites and everything, just watching vid, and like yeah, and then he's watching it, and then Barbara comes out and sees him watching porn.
There's a bit that I really liked where you're kind of looking, the shot of John, facing forward. whenever he's on his laptop. It's like you're kind of looking at him from the webcam or whatever.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then when she enters, like the camera gets picked up and
Yeah,
like
picks up
pointed at her.
and loot. Yeah, exactly. That was something I noticed, that it's like a very handheld. It's not like a pan over. It's like a lift and sort of physically
It's like
moves.
yeah,
It's
someone's
not.
picking up the camera to point it at her.
Yeah, exactly. And she's just like, "Oh, that's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen." It's like, really? Like,
Like really?
it's a
That
bit
is.
weird. I mean, to be fair, the fact that he does it like sort of immediately after sex, that's very weird. Because it's like, after that, I'd probably be tired. Just be
I
like,
don't think it's immediately after she fell
mm.
asleep.
But it's sort of a decent. Well, because it seems in some of his interactions he has with women, they like fall asleep and he's just like lying there, just awake, just like. And he seems almost disappointed in a way of like
Oh yeah, he's unfulfilled.
he's unfulfilled. So then he has to, watch porn to get fulfillment. And he explains why it works for him in a way that like real sex doesn't. And like I understand what he's saying. I just think it's a bit
It's
interesting.
definitely the addict trying to justify their
The yeah,
addiction. Like, it's
yeah.
addiction.
And she, gets very upset that he's watching porn, which I feel like if that's the biggest problem in a relationship, the relationship must be great. Like if that's the only problem, and like well the biggest problem.
If that's your yeah, if that's the issue. A pretty good relationship.
And then they, and he, man, his like explanation of what it was is like kind of like because he just thinks of this thing off the top of it. Well, because he first off he just tries denying it. He's like, nope, I wasn't watching that. But like he can't get out of that. He obviously was.
I was gonna say, she saw it.
Yeah,
So, and
and
he's
then it's
like,
like,
nah, it was a buddy.
yeah, buddy sent it to me. And then she asks him when was the last time he watched it. Like that matters too much. Like if he hasn't watched it since he got with you, does it matter? Like
You think he's gonna remember? Like he's gonna say, oh, well, months ago on the 22nd.
yeah, and he's like, I don't know, when I was a kid or something, which like is fair enough. Like to sort of justify the whole like sort of explain like, oh, I don't remember. It's like when I was a kid or something. Because and his whole explanation of why like oh no only losers watch porn. Why would they watch it if they can get with a real girl? And it's like he really does play up the fact that like he isn't, that like it really was a joke. He very much sort of just keeps going and justifying that he doesn't usually do this. Ugh. And he's able to calm her down and everything to her is alright. And he just keeps lying to her. Still keeps watching, just doesn't tell
Healthy
her.
relationship, eh?
Yeah, lying to your girlfriend about, you know, what you do in your free time, especially when you said you don't do it, is not good. It's not healthy. And
This, this, listeners haven't been clued in. This isn't a healthy relationship.
yeah, this is from both
Shocker.
parties. Both people are in the wrong.
Oh yeah, both people aren't exactly
Yeah, because of his
benefiting the
sort of
relationship.
treatment of women and sort of his. I mean, just lying at all is like not good. Like just lying to your partner. Just don't do it. Like, seems like common sense. Just don't lie.
It's pretty reasonable.
And then, but she also is also very bad, a very bad person. They go to a what is it like a
Hardware
store,
stores and
like a yeah store, and they're buying
some
what?
sort of shit. Yeah, like house appliances,
Yeah, yeah. And so what actually are they there to buy? It's like blind. Is it like blinds or is it like
something like that.
it's something like that? And then he talks about going
Some sort of
to
house furniture.
housing, yeah. And then he talks, he's got to go get some Swiffer pads to clean his apartment because he takes pride in it, which is fair enough. And then she gets upset at him and is
Yeah,
like,
this was the bit that I was like, okay, no, fuck you.
yeah, this
Yeah,
is,
like if man wants to clean his own house, let him.
And I've seen people mention that like it's kind of weird that a woman has a problem with a guy who can do like house cleaning and wants to do it, because that's like a problem in some relationships, and that the guy doesn't want to clean the house or the
Yeah,
where
that's
they
the
live.
stereotype that women should do cleaning. Like
Yeah,
if he's willing to do it and likes doing it,
yeah, exactly. Plus, like because he does take pride in the few things he does care about because it's they mean something to him.
I said the few things that are important.
Yeah, and one of them is his apartment, which is completely fair that he wants his place to look nice, but she's just like, she has a problem with it.
For some reason, she takes massive issue with it.
Yeah, and it's like, and tells him to stop talking about it because it's quote unquote not sexy. Like, well, cleaning isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that aren't inherently sexy that I'm sure he does, but cleaning,
I was gonna say, if you hate to buy blinds, I don't think that's gonna be really.
yeah, oh, hanging up blinds, oh goodness,
Oh yeah, definitely.
making the bed.
Don John.
Mm. It's weird. That's a very weird bit because it's like I understand what they're going for, but it is like I feel like they could have chosen something a bit different, maybe, as to sort of
I think it works within the context of the film that it is meant to be unreasonable. And...
yeah. It's just weird how she acts and wants him to be sort of molding him to her standards and her desires while not doing anything.
Yeah.
Not reciprocating, I guess.
And so I guess this show of her not kind of being a healthy part of this relationship, she goes through his browser history.
Yeah, which first of all, how does he not know what his browsing history is?
I don't know how to delete browser history.
Yeah, like it's so simple. It's not even like a difficult thing. You just like click on it and it's like, oh, delete history, and boom. Well, I mean, you have to open things, but it's not very difficult to just delete your history. To just
So yeah, surely like you've just on a web page.
Yeah.
And something that leads to your history.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's
yeah, on my laptop, look, yeah, on button click and there's a thing saying history.
Yeah, I've got on mine. It's just like three little dots, and then there's just a thing that says history, and then you could just go there and delete it because
Yeah, same. So yeah, go in history.
And it's just like, also that's just so, just like going through someone's history anyway. It's just really just not healthy. Like you shouldn't do that with your part. Like I would never expect. Like I would never want my partner.
Have enough trust not to feel the need to go through his browser history.
Exactly. Like and he seems like completely. Like because he never talks about it. He seems I mean in him like he's watching it, but like she doesn't know that, and he keeps it. Well, to her anyway, relatively well hidden. And it's like, man, that's just not... Because I feel like some stuff like this sort of has to happen, There's sort of like women who are a bit much and absolutely do things that they shouldn't be doing, like going through browser history. And, and so they break up and have... a scene, and he makes a good point that she watches romantic movies all the time too, and they're also ridiculous, and like it's not healthy to do that either.
I did really like the bit where she's like, "No, movies win awards," and he's like, "Well, do." I was like, "True."
That's one of my favorite lines and it's just the way he says it. He just says it like sort of subtly to himself, like, "Well, they give awards."
It's like he's kind of offended, and he's like, he's like,
they recognize it as well. Okay, it gets recognition it deserves, and he's not wrong. Like it does, and he's completely right. And they talk about sex and how she wants, and how they do it. Whenever she wants to do it. Not whenever he wants to do it. Well, I guess it's sort of implied when she wants to, but not when he wants to, because he says, like, we do it all the time, whenever you want to, And I guess sort of that implies that I mean, that's my interpretation was that they only do it when she wants to, not when he wants to. That's just sort
Yeah.
of what I took from that. And then
It's
she
what they say later on about, one-sided.
Mhm. Relationships and you know and she asks him, and she says like, what is wrong with you, and he's like, I don't know. And instead of trying to try and figure this out and see if she can help him, she just leaves him because he
He's got a porn addiction. Like, yeah, sure, don't help him out. Yeah, that's definitely.
and
Yeah, surprise, surprise. He has a bit of a downward spiral.
yeah, he talks about like
Record,
his
and
record in one day was like 10, and this day it got to 11 or something.
then he got 11 following the breakup.
Yeah, and it's just like, man, that's not good. Like, if that's all you're doing all day, like, that's just...
There's that little time lapse of him just, like, in his room.
And, like, the
all
pillow
day.
and the sheets are, like, coming off, and he's got, like, pizza and, and all this. And
yeah, and, oh. It's unpleasant to think about, just spending a whole day.
Yeah. Just, And it kind of makes sense that, like, he's arguably somewhat depressed after it. This massive breakup. Yeah. Because he wanted, like, in the, it seems like he wanted...
There's nothing to hold him back from watching as much as he wants that.
Yeah, exactly. And, he's at his classes and everything, which he doesn't want to do, but, like, one of his boys comes over and is like, come on, man, you're nearly finished, you should just finish it, And it takes him forever to explain why him and Barbara aren't together. Like, he just lies to his family, first of all, and says they're still together.
So he lets them believe that they're still together for quite a while.
Which is just, again, it's just lying, and it's not good. You shouldn't lie to your family about, what's going on.
But also, he lies to, his boy that kind of convinces him to go to classes. He also kind of lies to him about, the extent to which he was watching porn.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
He says, oh yeah, she's got me watching porn, like, one time.
Yeah.
When she looked at his photos, she says, like, 46 different websites.
Yeah. And she says, like... Yeah, I think she says, like, you looked at, like, 46 sites today or something.
46 websites in one day or something.
Yeah, and it's like, that's unhealthy. Like, that's not good.
Like, that is crippling addiction.
Yeah. And, yeah, it's sort of, he doesn't tell the full story. He just sort of says, like, she caught me watching porn. And his boy...
He basically merges the two incidents. He kind of says, oh yeah, she caught me watching porn.
Yeah. And then...
It translates that to the breakup.
Yeah. And so he's just sort of just not having the best time anymore. He's still going to his classes, and there's a note I made, actually, from a little bit before this, when he's still with Barbara. There's a subtle hint of, like, this, like, of the sort of romantic score, as John... Look, there's, like, a bit where John just, like, looks over at Esther, and there's, like, a slight subtle hint of, like, the score, like, the sort of romance score that sort of plays at a few points.
Okay, well, yeah, and then he connects more with Esther in that class.
And so, they're talking, and he's... And because before they talk a few times, and he just is getting annoyed with her. She just gives him a porn tape as well.
Yeah.
And he's just like, what is this? And she sort of explains that, like, oh, it's actually way better than the stuff you watch on your phone. Because it's, like, I presume it's so much
this is, a more accurate portrayal of what sex is.
Yeah. And, and then she starts, they start talking more, and he basically, like...
He sleeps with her in the car.
Yeah. They do it. And... Yeah. So, and then they start, sort of having a discussion about his addiction and what he gets from porn that he doesn't get from sex, and sort of what he, and why he does it, because she's not necessarily the most judgmental. She's not judgmental about it. I mean, she's a little bit at the beginning, but as he sort of explains why he's sort of addicted to it, she's much more sort of understanding of the whole thing.
Far more than Barbara was.
Yeah. And she tries to, she wants to help him and sort of help him get better and fix it. And she also sort of reveals that. That's actually later on. Sorry, never mind. I'll get that later on.
Oh no, this kind of leads directly to that,
Yeah.
Reveals
And so, yeah, they go to her place, and he's just sort of been having. Well, because he tried not watching porn for a week just to see how it would go, and he's not.
Yeah, try to masturbate without porn.
Yeah, and he apparently could not do it, so he's just like, ugh. And then they are gonna have a bath together, and then she just gets overwhelmed with emotion again, and John is just. I just wonder how long he's just like laying in that bath for, because when we see him later on, he's just like lying there, eyes closed, like it's
just lying there. Yeah, he's been there for a while.
Yeah, and then he gets out and just puts on a towel, and finds out. And then she explains that her son and partner both died, which is unfortunate. And then they, start. Well, first of all, something I noticed about this film.
He tells his family that.
I was going to talk about something slightly, but like something I noticed in this film that doesn't really happen in a lot of films anyway. Is that he puts a condom on at a few points, and you don't really see that in films often.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's one of those things that you just sort of is implied in films that never really like it just,
well, usually in films they start kissing or whatever, and then you pan away. But...
yeah, and then you cut back and they're just the post.
Yeah. Post-coital.
Yeah. And so they are together, and they sleep together. And then he sort of reveals. Actually, no, they go to church. There's a scene with him at the church first. And a note I made was that at all of the confessionals, he starts talking more and more to the priest, I guess, or whoever's behind yeah.
Yeah, and a bit of priest, I guess.
Yeah, and so like the last one, he sort of says that he only engaged in intercourse one time, and that was it. He was like off the porn, and then he still gets like the same amount of Lord's prayers and Hail Marys. And
so it's the same kind of penance of having to however many praise.
And he's just like so confused, and he just seems and he's really annoyed by the whole thing, and he thought he would get like a much smaller number than he would have, and I guess this is sort of part of him sort of rejecting or sort of not thinking that something's off with the whole thing, because he's just sort of he thought something would drastically change, and
it's because he's made such a massive difference. He thought he'd get a lesser
but no, it's the same number, and it's just like, come on. And it's so
I wasn't quite sure what they were trying to say with that, and then Reese is just like, have faith.
Yeah. He also just talks about how it was different than it usually is, like sort of things.
Yeah, he actually kind of cared.
Yeah. And so then they go.
Like you said, it wasn't just sex.
Yeah, it was different, in like a good way. It was just different from last time.
I did notice a little directorial thing. Pre-breakup with Barbara, goes to church, or just in his life, I guess the cinematography is a lot more kind of smooth flowing, like it's on a
tripod or like a dolly. A dolly, yeah.
Yeah. The pan's a lot more smooth, whereas post the breakup, it's a lot more like I guess it's handheld more, like it's shaky a lot.
Yeah.
I guess that kind of showing how he's kind of he's become a bit more unstable. I guess.
Yeah. I just want to say, sort of on the technical level, I think the score's really nice. I think it's a really nice score.
It didn't jump out at me that much.
And I think like sort of all the tech, like editing and cinematography and stuff, aren't
Oh
massively.
yeah, anything. That's the one that jumped out at me.
Yeah, because there's various unique editing techniques. Fast, just sort of flickering between images that like less than a second long, and all the stuff. And there's
Simple stuff like we'll go from one scene, we'll just cut to him and he's just like making his bed or whatever.
yeah, exactly.
Well
It's like
timed.
a smash cut to like he's in like he's like falling, he's going to bed with a girl, and then it just cuts to the next day, and he's putting his sheets over his bed and such. And,
Yeah, it's just really well timed.
Yeah.
So then he has lunch. Sunday lunch with his family again. He tells him he's broken up with Barbara.
Yeah.
Shit kind of hits the fan.
And they get all really his parents get really upset. I forgot
Brie
his character's name, but she just explains that
Monica.
Monica. Okay, yeah. And that she just I think this is the first time she's talked the entire movie. I don't think she's
she hasn't spoken at all before this.
Yeah, and she basically explains that the girl had her own agenda, and that she didn't care about John. She just wanted to force him to do what she wanted, and that it's better that he's that she's not with him anymore, which is just nice.
Yeah, it's nice that she kind of has his back with her.
Yeah,
he definitely seems to
and he's appreciative of it. And
that was a nice moment. I liked it.
Yeah, there's a bit where like the final time we see him driving, like the camera next to him, he's just like very happy.
He's singing.
He's singing, and he's just having a baller of a time. Just
Having
jamming in his car.
Yeah.
But he stops singing when he pulls up to like another car. He just like stops. Because I guess
he just looks away.
He just looks away. Just like, they drive away, and he just starts going back into it. Which is nice to show from the first one, where he's just yelling at people and saying that effing retarded and stuff, and
he kind of minds his own business a little bit more.
Yeah, he's just enjoying it, I guess, instead of raging at people for being retarded, as he would say.
He says, yeah.
And so he goes out to a pizza place with his boys, and they're eating pizza, and they're talking about the streak is over, like they're keeping track. I mean, because they are keeping track of it. And there's a bit, in fact, where like very early on, John mentions that they know about the streak, and then his friends tell him, you're sick, you messed up. That he's keeping track of, all this, and then they're talking about, yeah, and now they're just talking about this and how he just doesn't care anymore. And they mention this girl, and it's like, nah, her voice was like annoying though, and so I wasn't interested. And he says to one of his boys that like, oh, you were chatting up Ponytail, and he's like, oh, I got a number. And then they see, and he saved the number. The name is Ponytail, which like that just happens sometimes.
Yeah.
He just says, "Oh yeah, I just saved it as Ponytail." He doesn't actually. They don't care about the name. He just.
It's a woman, yeah.
It's just a woman, and it's Ponytail. So.
Ponytail.
That's sort of a recurring trope of sort of of like characters who are like this, like in Community, Jeff, the main character of Community, that's just what he is with all. There's an episode where is it Britta, I think it is, who goes to like his contact list of women, and they've all got nicknames.
She's just blonde from Spanish Class.
Yeah, hot blonde from Spanish Class, and then he does change it at the end of the episode for a nice poignant moment.
Yeah, no, it's just a very superficial,
Yeah.
Physical.
Yeah, and like, because it sort of seems like this is what would happen in.
So then he meets like Barbara for.
Yeah, they meet up with Barbara. He meets up with Barbara, one last time to apologize, and he does apologize for what he did. And she's just like, "Well, I don't know what to do."
I really like this bit.
I think this is really good, nice scene.
I love the bit where he's like, I asked you to do one thing and you couldn't do that, and then he's like, well,
no, you actually asked a lot of things. And like, from my memory of their relationship, I think all he just wanted was to have sex, right? Like, I don't think he really asked for much.
Yeah, he didn't really ask for anything.
Which I mean, to be
I
fair,
guess maybe.
like, although to be fair, just asking for sex, like that's a bit, it's a bit off.
I was going to say no. It is a double-ended sword. You know, she was asking a lot of things. He wasn't asking for much, but the thing he was asking for
Yeah.
sex.
And then they just sort of, and she sort of mentions that his hair is different now. He's stopped putting the stuff in it because Esther told him to, and said it's much better like this. And they just are talking, and he just
And she just leaves and says, "Don't contact me."
and she makes a point that, like, I don't exactly remember what she says, but she just makes the point that, like, oh, a man should be willing to do whatever a woman wants him to do, and then John says, like, well, isn't that a little bit one-sided? And then she's like, well, she says something like, well, if he loves her, then he doesn't care, or something at least to that effect. And I just think, like, this film, like, it really does portray, like, relationships can be like some people sort of have the perspective that relationships should be like that only one party should do everything for the other party, and it doesn't work like that. And
So yes, the way the film ends.
yeah, he's sort of has a final well, because there's an opening monologue where he talks about his
Life and
stuff and what he cares about and everything, and then and in this scene he talks about Esther and their sort of relationship and how like they're not going to get married or anything, which is fine because that's completely that's fine.
If you don't want to get married, then that's fine.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to get married, and she kind of can't because of her life, but they're still
Not a baggage of.
Yeah, and they sort of, he has a final monologue sort of talking about, like, when they're together he sort of does lose himself in her. Like,
Yeah, he gets the reaction. The way he reacts to her is the way he reacted to the Pawns.
Yeah, and he's sort of off
able to get. He finds satisfaction. He's able to emotionally.
Yeah, and it sort of concludes, with that sort of very quick, like, flickering, the two of them together in the flash.
Back and forth.
Yeah, and then the film ends on a happy note.
And I was surprised to see written and directed by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, so I had no idea that he wrote.
Oh, you didn't know until after the film? Okay.
Oh, no.
So I think that's kind of, well, that's a lot of, that's most of the film. I'm just seeing if there's any notes I made that any notes I made. I think I've sort of got everything I want to talk about. I've sort of talked a bit about how the film sort of talks about how society is, sort of made men view porn, and how sex and porn, and how women view relationships from rom-coms, and how they're both wrong and they don't really understand it. And I think that's pretty much it. I think that's pretty much it. Do you have any sort of final things you want to touch on in the film?
Specifically in the film, no, I think I'm nice about it.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to rating?
Yeah, so...
Well, I like the film. I do have issues with it that,
that we did touch on, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's very nicely... I think technically I think I got a lot more out of it. I did appreciate the way it was directed, and especially since I didn't know it was Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I think I was a bit more impressed when I saw it was him. Editing, I really did think that was really good. It is a very watchable film. It's a very, very smooth 90 minutes. It's not exactly one to watch with the whole family, but it's a
absolutely
very easy watch. And I'd give it a solid 7 out.
Yeah, I've sort of figured you might give it a 7 out of 10, and I'm going to give a higher score than that because I do like the film more. I do sort of agree with a few of the points you made, the problems you had with the film, but they sort of don't bother me as much, and I can sort of understand them and sort of see what they're going for. I think this is probably Joseph Gordon-Levitt's best performance of his career, of what I've seen of him. Of course, I haven't seen Looper. Is probably the only other one that could possibly check this. And I think sort of throughout the performances are all really decent. I think the script is very good, very well written. I think has lots of really great things to say about society and people, and I just think it's a great film. So I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10. It might be a bit generous, but I still think it's really good, and I really like it.
Yeah, I think it came to it from a different place.
Yeah. So, just out of curiosity, you have a list on the last episode when you mentioned you had a list of every film you've seen rated, and you put them all in the list. Yeah. Just out of curiosity, where does Don John land on that list of how many films is that now? 1,000 and something, right?
Which is out of 1,084.
1,084, okay. So, wait, which was it at? Sorry?
Just roughly halfway.
Halfway, okay. For me...
529.
Well, that's not too bad. That is, about halfway. For me...
Yeah, no, that's roughly halfway, and it's definitely in the good portion.
Yeah. I mean, a 7 out of 10 is a good score. That is a good movie.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely amongst the films I like and enjoy.
For me, I've only got a list of my top 100 favorite films, but for me this lands at number 90 of 100, which is high, I would argue. I will say that Shame is better. So,
very different,
but albeit very different. It's a much darker film, but it sort of touches on sort of similar themes and ideas, I guess. So I think that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining me again, Barney, for another episode.
Oh yeah, thank you.
And
always a pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll be back. You'll be back for some more in the future. Got some stuff.
Film related.
Yeah, I've got a couple episodes planned with George, which will be a lot of fun whenever he's able to record. Hopefully in a few months, because of during the Christmas period, maybe. Who knows? So, thank you for listening to this week's episode. Hope you all enjoyed. It was a bit of a long one, but these episodes are starting to become longer because there's just lots to talk about with these films. So check out the social media. Check out the website as well. Check me out on Letterboxd. Barney, is there anything you would like to plug?
Just check me out.
You have got an IMDb account if people.
Yeah, I mean, those who are interested on checking out stuff, everything that rated, ranked.
And you've got a separate one.
Gives yes, I have one for TV where I rank various episodes of individual TV shows. So I guess give William a link so you can track them on those who are interested.
So once again, thank you all for listening, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.